The night in Paris was electric, almost too electric, as if the entire city had conspired to bear witness to something extraordinary. But no one expected the storm that would erupt inside one of its most exclusive venues, the legendary Crazy Horse Cabaret. Guests mingled under the warm glow of dimmed chandeliers, champagne glasses in hand, laughter and the soft hum of conversation filling the air. Yet, there was a tension lurking just beneath the surface, invisible to most, but impossible to ignore for those who knew how fragile the veneer of celebrity civility could be. That tension, unbeknownst to anyone at the time, was about to be shattered by an uninvited presence, someone whose name alone was enough to spark headlines, memes, and whispered gossip that would circle the world within hours. Meghan Markle had arrived. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine this, a room filled with A-list celebrities, models, influencers, and moguls, each carefully curated and personally invited by Kim Kardashian for her birthday celebration. Every detail of the evening was orchestrated to perfection. The music, the lighting, the seating arrangements, the menu, and even the order in which guests would take their selfies or pose for the press. This was not a casual gathering. This was a meticulously choreographed spectacle where every glance, every nod, every handshake was part of a delicate dance of social hierarchy and status. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, Meghan appeared, uninvited, her presence instantly upsetting the balance. Have you ever been to an event and felt completely out of place? Picture the dissonance of stepping into a room where everyone knows the rules and you don't, where every smile you offer is measured, every word you speak analyzed, every gesture scrutinized. That was Meghan in that moment. Her entrance was not just unplanned. It was a direct challenge to the order of the evening, an intrusion that some might call audacious, others might call reckless. And yet, there was an undeniable allure to her presence. She had the kind of aura that demanded attention, whether the room wanted it or not. From the moment she stepped into the foyer, the atmosphere shifted. Cameras clicked, not because she was part of the guest list, but because the tension itself was irresistible. Celebrities paused mid-conversation, their eyes following her as she made her way through the crowd. There was a mix of curiosity and unease in those glances. Would she be charming? Would she overstep? Or would this intrusion trigger a confrontation that everyone would remember for years to come? The whispers began almost immediately. Who invited her? She's not on the list. Is Kim aware of this? Every question hung in the air like a charged spark, ready to ignite. What makes this story more fascinating than a simple celebrity snub is the characters involved. Kim Kardashian is not just a celebrity. She is a cultural strategist, a woman who has mastered the art of influence, perception, and social control. Her parties are not mere celebrations. They are showcases of power, status, and taste. To be ignored by Kim is a social death sentence, even for someone as high-profile as Meghan Markle. And Meghan? Well, she is no stranger to controversy. Known worldwide as a former actress turned royal, then a duchess, then a figure of relentless media scrutiny, she has navigated some of the most intense public attention imaginable. Yet, even she was not immune to the intricacies of celebrity social politics. Let's consider the stakes for a moment. This was not just a birthday party. This was Paris. This was Crazy Horse. The kind of venue where the elite come to see and be seen, where exclusivity is currency, and where reputation is everything. Being uninvited to such an event is one thing. Showing up anyway is another entirely. It's the difference between a calculated risk and a miscalculated gamble. And what Meghan did next would blur that line in ways no one anticipated. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be in the eye of a social hurricane? To watch as your entrance sends ripples through a room, as every head turns, every whisper rises, every pair of eyes silently evaluates you? That was the beginning of Meghan's night at Kim's birthday. The cameras might have captured her smile, but they could never fully capture the tension that crackled in the air. Each step she took was a statement, whether intended or not. And each step brought her closer to an inevitable confrontation that no one could escape. Here's the part that most people don't realize. These moments are not just about ego. They are about perception. They are about control. Kim Kardashian knows this better than anyone. Every interaction she orchestrates, Every guest she chooses or excludes, every glance she allows or withholds, shapes the narrative of her life and her influence. To allow someone uninvited into this carefully constructed universe is not just a minor oversight. It's a potential disruption of her authority. And in the world of celebrities, authority is everything. But what made this encounter truly remarkable wasn't just the social dynamics. It was the personalities involved. Meghan Markle, a woman accustomed to commanding attention, expecting recognition, and thriving under scrutiny, faced someone who was equally formidable, equally unyielding, and unwilling to play by her rules. The collision of these two forces, one uninvited, the other unapologetically in control, set the stage for a drama that would reverberate far beyond the gilded walls of Crazy Horse. The whispers in the room began to intensify as Meghan approached the inner circle of the party. Staff members exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to manage this unanticipated guest. Some guests tried to politely intervene, offering smiles that were meant to disarm, but their efforts were largely futile. Meghan's presence was a magnetic disturbance, impossible to ignore, impossible to quietly integrate. And then, the moment arrived, the moment that would define the night and eventually spark global headlines. Kim Kardashian turned to Meghan, her expression calm, poised, and unreadable. A single phrase left her lips, one that would be dissected endlessly on social media, repeated in countless articles, memes, and late-night monologues. "I don't know you." 3 simple words, yet they carried a weight heavier than any royal decree or celebrity insult. They were a dismissal, a declaration of boundaries, and a power move all at once. And in that instant, Meghan's night took a dramatic turn, one that no one in the room would forget. But this story is not just about a snub. It's about what happens next, about the private conversations, the security interventions, the reactions behind closed doors, and the viral explosion that followed. It's about social strategy, public perception, and the delicate art of managing influence in a room full of powerful people. And most importantly, it's about the moments that aren't captured by cameras, the interactions that play out in whispers, glances, and gestures, shaping the narrative long before it hits the headlines. So, what really happened that night at Crazy Horse? How did Meghan react to being publicly dismissed by one of the most powerful social figures in the world? What secrets were exchanged behind the velvet ropes? And who ultimately emerged with their reputation intact? These are the questions that will drive this story, chapter by chapter, revealing every twist, every emotional spike, and every surprising fact that makes this encounter unforgettable. And just when you think you know how the night ended, there's a twist that nobody expected. A revelation that changes everything and leaves everyone involved, including Meghan herself, stunned. Because in the world of high-profile celebrity events, appearances are everything. Control is currency, and one uninvited guest can turn an entire evening into a spectacle that the world will talk about for months, if not years. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Introduction complete. Ready for me to move on to Chapter 1. The invitation that wasn't? You said, go. ChatGPT said, here's the fully fleshed out Chapter 1. The invitation that wasn't. 2,000 plus words, following your structure, retention tactics, and style rules. The first question everyone asked that night, quietly but urgently, was simple. Who invited her? It wasn't spoken aloud at first, just a ripple of uneasy murmurs weaving through the velvet-clad room. But by the time Meghan Markle stepped through the grand entrance of Crazy Horse in Paris, that question had become the unspoken heartbeat of the party. Invitations to Kim Kardashian's birthdays were legendary, curated, vetted, and almost impossible to obtain. Each guest had been personally approved, each name carefully weighed against the delicate balance of celebrity politics, social influence, and personal relationships. There was no room for error. There was certainly no room for surprises. And yet here she was, Meghan Markle, Duchess turned Hollywood royalty, casually walking into a room where every seat, every smile, every champagne flute had been meticulously accounted for. To the casual observer, it might have looked like a simple entrance, a woman arriving at a party. But anyone who has ever been inside one of these curated celebrity environments knew the truth. Meghan's arrival was seismic. It was a breach of social protocol, an unexpected disruption that sent subtle shocks through the meticulously constructed social ecosystem. Let's paint the scene. The interior of Crazy Horse was alive with energy. Low amber lighting bathed the dancers' silhouettes on stage, the clink of glasses and soft buzz of conversation filling the air like a musical undercurrent. The decor was elegant but provocative, a delicate balance of seduction and sophistication. Every detail was intentional, designed to create an immersive experience that celebrated glamour, beauty, and influence. And in the center of it all was Kim, calm, poised, and fully aware of the power she commanded. Guests had arrived hours earlier, navigating a series of security checks, VIP entrances, and private elevator rides. Photographers outside had captured glimpses of arrivals, carefully coordinated to ensure maximum visibility for the select few who mattered. Invitations weren't just about attendance. They were a performance, a statement of social alignment, a stamp of inclusion into an elite inner circle. To appear without one was almost unthinkable, and yet Meghan had managed it. Somehow, whether through sheer audacity, a lapse in security, or a calculated gamble, she had breached the perimeter and walked directly into the heart of a social event that was not hers. Have you ever experienced a moment where you realized you didn't belong, even though you were physically present? Imagine the mental gymnastics required to navigate such a situation. Meghan, known for her composure under media scrutiny, suddenly faced a new challenge. A room full of people who weren't expecting her, who weren't prepared to acknowledge her, and whose reactions could range from polite indifference to outright hostility. Every step she took was under silent evaluation. Every glance she offered carried weight. Every smile she attempted was measured against the unspoken rules of the party. The inner circle of Kim's closest friends and collaborators immediately took note. Security personnel, ever vigilant, exchanged quick, tense glances. Some moved subtly, positioning themselves between Meghan and the most sensitive areas of the venue. The private lounge, the main stage, and, most importantly, the birthday girl herself. Event coordinators whispered into earpieces, their voices low but urgent, trying to determine whether this was a misunderstanding or a deliberate act. The tension was palpable, invisible but undeniable, like the static before a storm. But what about Meghan herself? To outsiders, she appeared composed, almost serene, her posture confident, her smile practiced. Yet beneath the surface, there was a different story. This wasn't just a social misstep. It was a test of her social influence, her ability to assert presence in an environment where she was not sanctioned. Did she believe she could command attention simply by existing in the room? Was this an impulsive act of ego, or a calculated move to assert dominance in a space ruled by another powerful woman? The answer would soon reveal itself, in ways that nobody in the room could have predicted. Let's step back for a moment and consider the psychological stakes. In elite social settings, power is currency. Every interaction is a negotiation, every smile an investment, every glance a transaction. By entering uninvited, Meghan had disrupted the balance of power. She was no longer a passive observer. She had become an active variable, an unpredictable element whose presence forced every other guest to react. Some would be curious, some irritated, some amused, but everyone would notice. And in the world of celebrity dynamics, being noticed can be a double-edged sword. The whispers grew louder as Meghan moved closer to the core of the party. Her trajectory was deliberate, each step measured to maximize visibility without overtly challenging authority. She wasn't there to hide. She was there to be seen. But seen by whom? Kim Kardashian, of course, the ultimate arbiter of social power in that room. And Kim, known for her meticulous control over every social environment she inhabits, noticed immediately. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, tracked Meghan's every movement. To those watching, it was a silent duel, a battle of presence and perception played out without words. Now, imagine being a guest witnessing this scene. Perhaps you had spent months planning your outfit, rehearsing greetings, and memorizing your place in the social hierarchy. You arrive, expecting the smooth execution of an evening crafted to perfection, only to have an uninvited figure stride into the center of attention, potentially disrupting every carefully laid plan. How would you feel? Unease? Curiosity? Excitement? All of the above? For many in that room, Meghan's presence was a thrill, a source of gossip, and a challenge to the status quo rolled into one. And yet, not everyone was amused. Some of Kim's closest allies began subtle interventions, offering smiles that were measured but cold, guiding conversation away from Meghan's orbit, and positioning themselves strategically to maintain control. Security, trained to anticipate disruptions, remained alert. Cameras that were initially focused on the celebratory moments now subtly shifted, capturing the tension without explicitly showing the confrontation. Every professional movement, every calculated gesture, underscored the stakes. Meghan had entered a room that was not hers, and the ramifications of her arrival were only beginning to unfold. Have you ever wondered what it's like to navigate a space where every eye is evaluating you, every word you speak is interpreted, and every gesture is analyzed for hidden meaning? That's what Meghan faced. And as she approached the inner circle, it became clear that her presence would not go unnoticed. Staff whispered to one another. Guests exchanged uncertain glances, and the air seemed to grow heavier, charged with anticipation. Something was about to happen, and everyone felt it, even if they couldn't articulate it. The true drama of the evening, however, lay not in Meghan's entrance, but in the reaction it would provoke. Kim Kardashian, calm and poised, understood that ignoring Meghan entirely was an option, but one that came with risks. Engaging her was another option, fraught with its own dangers. Every possible response carried weight. A smile could be seen as acknowledgement, a glance as confrontation, a gesture as an invitation or a rebuke. The subtle art of celebrity diplomacy was on full display, invisible yet palpable, as the room held its collective breath. So why does this story matter? Because it's a lesson in power, perception, and social strategy. Because it reveals what happens when audacity collides with authority. And because, in the world of high-profile events, even the smallest misstep can spiral into a narrative that dominates headlines, memes, and social media conversations for weeks. Meghan's decision to attend uninvited set into motion a series of events that no one could have fully predicted, and the consequences would be felt far beyond the walls of Crazy Horse. But what made this evening unforgettable was not just the breach of protocol. It was the way that breach highlighted the subtle, yet unyielding, power structures that govern celebrity interactions. Every glance, every whisper, every calculated movement told a story of influence, control, and reputation. And as Meghan moved deeper into the party, closer to Kim herself, it became evident that the night would not proceed as anyone had expected. What came next would define the rest of the evening. A moment of confrontation, subtle yet profound, was looming on the horizon. Every guest sensed it, every staff member anticipated it, and Meghan herself had no idea how the dynamics would shift. The tension was nearly unbearable, like a coiled spring ready to snap. And in a room where appearances are everything, the collision between an uninvited guest and the queen of celebrity control was inevitable. But the pivotal moment, the one that would shock guests, staff, and eventually the world, was about to arrive. What Meghan did next, and how Kim responded, would ignite a firestorm that no one could contain. And when it finally happened, it would be replayed, dissected, and debated for months to come. This was not merely a birthday party. This was a stage, a test, a battlefield. And the first skirmish had only just begun. Paris at night has a way of magnifying everything. The lights, the sounds, the whispers of scandal that seem to float on the same breeze. The city's elegance and history give every moment a cinematic quality. And for Kim Kardashian's birthday at Crazy Horse, the stakes were higher than ever. The venue itself was legendary, a stage for glamour and exclusivity, where even the most seasoned celebrities felt a thrill simply by stepping inside. But no amount of glitter or sophistication could have prepared anyone for the arrival of Meghan Markle. Picture this. The red carpet was set, cameras trained on every guest as they made their entrance. Champagne flutes sparkled under the soft lighting, designers' gowns flowed like liquid silk, and laughter rippled through the air, carefully measured and timed. Every arrival had been meticulously choreographed, ensuring that Kim's spotlight remained undisturbed, that the party's rhythm flowed without hiccup, that every social interaction reinforced the hierarchy carefully curated by the host. And then, like a bolt of lightning splitting a clear sky, Meghan Markle appeared. Her entrance was subtle but deliberate, a contrast to the pomp and precision of the other arrivals. There was no limousine escorted by a battalion of security, no prearranged photographers capturing the perfect shot. Instead, she slipped into the venue almost casually, as though she belonged there. But make no mistake, this was no accident. Every step she took was a calculated statement, whether she fully realized it or not. She was making herself visible, asserting presence, and challenging the carefully maintained order of one of the most elite gatherings in the world. The first ripple of reaction was almost imperceptible. Guests paused mid-conversation, their eyes darting to the newcomer. Some whispered to neighbors, attempting to identify her, to reconcile the contradiction of her presence. Is she on the list? Did she get invited? Kim must know. These murmurs grew louder as Meghan made her way through the crowd, each step increasing tension in a room that thrived on control and predictability. Have you ever walked into a room where everyone knew the rules and you didn't? That feeling of being an outsider, of disrupting a delicate social ecosystem, is electrifying and terrifying. Meghan had stepped into that zone with confidence, but the environment was uncharted territory. Every glance she gave, every smile she offered, was under scrutiny. She was visible, yet not sanctioned. She was noticed, yet not acknowledged. And in that tension lay the drama that would define the night. The contrast could not have been starker. Kim Kardashian, the birthday girl, radiated poise and control. She had spent months planning this evening, ensuring that each element, from guest list to lighting, from stage layout to entertainment, was perfect. Her entrance earlier in the evening had been like a masterclass in charisma, confident, graceful, commanding attention without demanding it. Meghan's entrance, on the other hand, was an unsanctioned ripple of energy, challenging the carefully orchestrated flow and threatening to disrupt the narrative Kim had meticulously constructed. Security personnel immediately took note. A subtle shift in posture, a slight tightening of the formation around Kim and her inner circle, a quiet whisper into earpieces, all signs of the high-alert state that had been triggered. Event coordinators exchanged rapid, almost imperceptible glances. Staff members who were accustomed to handling high-profile attendees found themselves navigating an unexpected variable, unsure how to manage an uninvited yet high-profile guest. And through it all, Meghan moved forward, confident, aware, or perhaps blissfully unaware, of the storm she was walking into. The energy in the room changed with her every step. Guests who had been laughing moments before now tilted their heads, observing, processing, evaluating. The subtle shift in atmosphere was almost tangible. It was the difference between a calm evening and one crackling with tension, the kind of tension that makes everyone present acutely aware of every word, every gesture, every glance. The stakes were no longer just social, they were psychological. Every attendee became a participant in an unspoken game of perception and influence. And then the whispers started to spread. Not from one corner, not from one group, but like wildfire moving through dry grass. Did she just? Is she supposed to be here? I think Kim sees her. Each whisper carried weight. The rumor mill of celebrity parties moves fast, and the presence of Meghan Markle, a woman whose public persona is a constant magnet for scrutiny, was like pouring gasoline on a lit match. Within moments, the uninvited guest had become the focal point of everyone in the room, her presence shaping conversations, altering social dynamics, and forcing everyone to navigate an uncomfortable, unprecedented scenario. Have you ever been in a situation where your arrival alone changed everything? Where the room adjusted itself in real time to accommodate your unexpected presence? That is exactly what happened as Meghan moved toward the inner circle of the party. Every smile she offered was weighed and measured, every attempt at conversation was scrutinized, and every step brought her closer to a confrontation that would define the evening. And then came the pivotal moment, the one that would be replayed, dissected, and discussed for weeks to come. Meghan approached Kim, navigating the crowd with a confidence that belied the social tightrope she was walking. For a split second, it seemed as though time itself had slowed. Guests froze mid-giggle, cameras caught fleeting expressions of disbelief, and the room collectively held its breath. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, whether they realized it or not. Kim's eyes, ever sharp, locked onto Meghan. There was no hesitation, no sign of surprise, no outward acknowledgement beyond a subtle shift in posture. The calm, poised energy that Kim exuded was suddenly the stage on which Meghan's audacity would be tested. The moment had arrived for one of the most famous dismissals in celebrity history. And when Kim spoke those words, simple yet devastating, the room collectively flinched. "I don't know you." 3 words. That was all it took. A dismissal, a boundary, a power move. But for Meghan, it was more than a social snub. It was an unmistakable public statement. And for everyone else in the room, it was a revelation. Even the most audacious, most high-profile intruder could be stopped by the subtle, yet unyielding authority of Kim Kardashian. But the story doesn't end there. The cameras captured only part of the narrative, the polished, public-facing exchange. What happened behind closed doors, in the whispers and glances, the gestures and hushed instructions, was a drama that would ripple far beyond the walls of Crazy Horse. Staff discussions, private conversations between guests, strategic moves by security, all of it contributed to a web of intrigue that would dominate headlines and social media feeds in the days to come. So what does this moment teach us about power, presence, and perception? It's a masterclass in social strategy. It's about understanding not just how to make an entrance, but how to navigate an environment where control, influence, and optics are everything. Meghan's arrival was audacious, yes, but it was also a test, a challenge to the carefully maintained social order. And the consequences, immediate and long-term, would be profound. Guests continued to watch, some with amusement, some with awe, others with barely concealed judgment. Each interaction, each whispered comment, each glance toward Meghan became part of an invisible narrative, unfolding in real time. And while some assumed that the tension would dissipate, the reality was far different. The presence of an uninvited guest of Meghan Markle's stature ensured that the night would be anything but ordinary. As the party continued, with performances on stage and champagne flowing freely, the psychological chess game had already begun. Meghan had made her move. Kim had responded with precision. The guests, the staff, and the media observers were all now participants in a narrative that had been rewritten in mere moments. And as the night stretched on, the stakes only grew higher. Every conversation, every camera angle, every subtle gesture would be scrutinized, dissected, and immortalized. But just when it seemed that the night had reached its climax, just when the tension had peaked with that unforgettable phrase, the evening had yet another twist in store. Because in celebrity environments, the public snub is only the beginning. The reactions, the strategies, the whispered alliances, and the social maneuvering behind the scenes often eclipse the moment itself. And what came next would not just amplify the drama, it would redefine it entirely. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment of first contact is always the most revealing. In high-stakes social environments, it's where true dynamics emerge. Gestures, expressions, posture, and even silence convey far more than words ever could. That night at Crazy Horse, the world witnessed a masterclass in social confrontation, even though most of it unfolded without a single camera capturing the private tension. Meghan Markle had moved closer, navigating the crowded room with her characteristic poise. Every step was deliberate, every glance intentional. But this was no ordinary crowd. This was Kim Kardashian's inner circle, a tight-knit, high-profile group trained, consciously or not, to preserve the host's aura and maintain a meticulously curated social hierarchy. To approach them uninvited was audacious. Some might even call it reckless. But Meghan's presence carried weight. She was accustomed to commanding attention, whether on a royal stage, in front of paparazzi, or under the scrutinizing gaze of millions. And yet, nothing in her experience had fully prepared her for the reception that awaited. Have you ever stepped into a situation where you expected acknowledgement, perhaps even admiration, but received a wall of indifference instead? That is precisely what Meghan encountered. Kim, the undisputed queen of controlled environments, did not flinch. There was no dramatic gasp, no over-the-top reaction, no hint of surprise. Her eyes followed Meghan's approach, sharp, measured, and assessing. The subtle shift in her posture, the slight tightening of her jaw, were invisible to many but spoke volumes to those attuned to the nuances of power dynamics. The room seemed to contract, the chatter dimming slightly as guests instinctively recognized that a pivotal moment was unfolding. Security subtly adjusted their positions, ensuring that Kim's personal space remained impenetrable while still allowing Meghan to be visible to the crowd. Staff members exchanged quick glances, knowing that any misstep could escalate the situation from a controlled curiosity to a full-blown social catastrophe. And then it happened. Meghan extended herself toward the inner circle, offering a practiced smile, a gesture meant to bridge the uninvited gap, to signal charm and approachability. But the reception she received was not warm. Instead of the acknowledgement she may have anticipated, there was a carefully calibrated coolness, a polite distance that reinforced boundaries without creating public spectacle. Kim did not lean in. She did not offer a greeting. Her body remained slightly turned, her attention focused elsewhere, though unmistakably aware. It's astonishing how much power can reside in a single gesture, or the absence of one. Meghan's smile, poised to open doors, was met with an almost imperceptible shift of Kim's shoulders. A subtle sign, barely noticed by most, but glaringly obvious to those who understood the language of controlled social spaces. It was a statement: presence alone is not permission. Recognition is not guaranteed. In other words, Meghan had made the move, but the room, and its most influential figure, was not ready to respond on her terms. Guests around them began to murmur, quietly but knowingly. A few whispered speculation about the uninvited guest's audacity. Others were more observant, noting the tiny cues of Kim's body language. Every flick of an eyebrow, every glance sideways, every measured pause was dissected by those who had become connoisseurs of celebrity dynamics. Even in a room brimming with beauty and wealth, these moments revealed the unspoken hierarchies, the invisible lines drawn between who belonged and who was tolerated. Have you ever had the experience of being acknowledged, but not fully seen? Meghan's position in that room was precisely that. She was visible, undeniably present, but denied the recognition that would have legitimized her attendance. Every subtle rebuff, every intentional pause by Kim, communicated control. And in a world where appearances are currency, this was a lesson in public image that Meghan could not afford to ignore. But Meghan was nothing if not strategic. If one approach did not work, another might. She adjusted, shifting slightly to engage a nearby influencer, attempting to navigate the social terrain with charm and grace. Yet even these minor interactions were subtly monitored. Allies of Kim, fully aware of the potential for disruption, positioned themselves in ways that would minimize Meghan's influence, redirecting conversation and attention while still maintaining an aura of civility. It was a dance of diplomacy, played out in gestures and proximity rather than words, a game of power in which every participant understood the stakes. And then came the moment that would define the encounter. Meghan made the decision to directly engage Kim, closing the gap and positioning herself squarely in the field of vision. This was bold, more than bold, it was audacious. In celebrity culture, direct engagement is fraught with risk. To approach someone of Kim's influence, uninvited and unannounced, is to gamble with reputation. Yet Meghan's posture, her calm expression, and her controlled smile suggested confidence, perhaps even expectation. She believed that presence alone could demand acknowledgement, that the force of her persona could overcome any barriers. Kim's response, when it came, was subtle but devastating. Not a word yet, not a gesture, just a shift in her gaze, a minor but deliberate repositioning of her body, and a moment of silence that stretched almost unbearably. Meghan's eyes likely caught the nuance, the unspoken refusal. There was a stark contradiction here. Meghan, accustomed to admiration and recognition, met with a figure whose calm composure signaled authority and control. The room felt charged, the air heavy with anticipation. Everyone sensed that the next words would carry immense weight. Have you ever experienced the sting of subtle rejection? Not the dramatic, visible kind, but the quiet, controlled, almost imperceptible disapproval that speaks louder than words. That was the reality of Meghan's first contact with Kim. It was a demonstration of social power that required no theatrics, no public confrontation. The effect was immediate. Meghan's confidence faltered slightly, her practiced poise tested in a way that few had ever dared to challenge her. Guests shifted in their seats, cameras captured fleeting expressions, and social media would later dissect the interactions frame by frame. Yet the real drama remained behind the scenes, in the unspoken language of proximity, gesture, and body orientation. Every movement, every glance, every minor adjustment was a calculated act, either asserting presence or maintaining control. And in that delicate, tension-filled space, a quiet battle was being waged, a battle not of words, but of perception, influence, and authority. It's fascinating how much can happen in a single moment of contact. Meghan's approach, the room's reaction, and Kim's poised refusal were all microcosms of a larger social drama. Power dynamics in real time, played out under the gaze of an audience that included both celebrities and millions of viewers who would eventually see snippets of the night. The first contact was not just a greeting. It was an assertion, a test, and ultimately, a lesson in boundaries and influence. And just when it seemed that the tension had reached its peak, Meghan attempted a final maneuver, a subtle adjustment of posture, a slight step forward, perhaps an attempt to bridge the distance with charm or a conversational opener. But the message had already been sent, clear and undeniable. Recognition is earned, not assumed, and even the most high-profile presence can be denied when authority and control dictate. The audience, whether in the room or watching through lenses, could sense the psychological chess game unfolding. Meghan had initiated the move, Kim had countered with measured precision, and the guests were caught in the crossfire, witnessing a lesson in social power that few would forget. Every whispered conversation, every evaluative glance, every small gesture contributed to a narrative that extended far beyond the venue itself. But even as Meghan faced this subtle yet undeniable rebuff, the night was far from over. There were more challenges ahead, more social maneuvers, and an eventual escalation that would shock both attendees and the world. The first contact had set the tone, but the next moves, the responses, the strategies, the interactions behind closed doors, would define the remainder of the evening. Because in high-profile environments like this, the first contact is never just a greeting. It's a test, a statement, and a prelude. And what came next would escalate the tension to levels nobody in that room could have anticipated. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The room had grown quieter, not loud silence, but the tense, expectant hush of a moment that everyone felt in their bones. Meghan Markle stood a few steps away from Kim Kardashian, her presence bold, her expression poised, and yet, unknowingly, her entire evening was about to pivot on a single exchange. One phrase, one sentence that would reverberate across social media, tabloids, and celebrity gossip columns for weeks. "I don't know you." 3 words. That was all it took. And yet, in that room, at that precise moment, those words carried the weight of an entire social universe. It was not just a refusal, a snub, or a rejection. It was a masterstroke of subtle authority, a declaration of boundaries, and a display of power wrapped in the quietest, most elegant package possible. No screaming, no theatrics, just the unmistakable message that presence alone does not entitle one to acknowledgement. Imagine hearing those words in a high-pressure social situation. Not shouted, not aggressive, but calm, clear, and deliberate. A statement so concise and precise that it stops conversation in its tracks, redirects the focus, and instantly establishes the speaker as the authority. That was Kim at that moment, composed, unshakable, and fully aware of the impact of her words. And Meghan, for the first time that evening, confronted a reality she could not simply charm her way around. The initial reaction was nearly imperceptible but electric in its effect. Guests blinked, cameras shifted, and the subtle hum of the party was pierced by the mental gasp of recognition. Social media observers, privy to snippets and leaks, would later replay this moment in infinite slow motion, dissecting body language, posture, and the tiny micro-expressions that defined the exchange. Those 3 words became a masterclass in celebrity diplomacy, a moment of social calculus so precise it left the entire room in awe. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone spoke so plainly, so directly, and yet so powerfully, that everything around you seemed to rearrange itself? That was Meghan's experience in that instant. She had walked into a room where she expected acknowledgement, perhaps even recognition, but instead was confronted with the reality of boundaries, control, and social hierarchy. It was a humbling, almost shocking demonstration of influence, and one she would never forget. The contrast could not have been starker. Meghan, used to commanding attention, accustomed to public admiration, faced someone who required no external validation. Kim's words were not intended to humiliate. They were designed to assert authority and maintain equilibrium. And yet, the effect was undeniable. In that moment, Meghan's confidence, built over years of public life, was tested against the quiet, unyielding force of calculated social control. Guests around them sensed the gravity of the moment. Some whispered behind hands, quietly speculating, while others tried to maintain composure, their curiosity barely contained. Social media would later amplify these whispers into a frenzy, but in the room itself, the tension was palpable. Every guest, no matter how high-profile or seasoned, understood that they were witnessing a moment of cultural significance. A lesson in influence, social power, and perception. Even the staff noticed. Event coordinators, photographers, and security personnel who had been trained to handle VIP guests now had to navigate an entirely new variable. Meghan's presence, combined with Kim's decisive response, had shifted the dynamics. Staff whispered into earpieces, adjusting positions subtly, ensuring that the evening continued without physical or social chaos, but recognizing that the narrative of the night had irrevocably changed. And then there was Meghan's reaction. She didn't immediately respond verbally. There was no retort, no attempt to counteract the snub. But her eyes betrayed the inner whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. Confusion, disbelief, indignation. Flashes of all three crossed her expression, barely perceptible but unmistakable to those trained in reading microexpressions. In a single heartbeat, the atmosphere shifted. Meghan's confidence, a hallmark of her public persona, was now tempered by an unexpected confrontation with unyielding authority. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's words landed with precision, instantly altering the power dynamics of a room? That was this moment. Kim's refusal was elegant, understated, and absolute. It required no explanation, no theatrics, and no public commentary. The words themselves, spoken calmly, carried all the weight needed to redefine the interaction and assert dominance without aggression. Social media would later explode over this moment, dissecting every angle, speculating endlessly about the tone, the timing, and the implications. Memes were born, gifs circulated, and celebrities weighed in on what quickly became one of the most discussed social snubs in recent memory. Yet behind the screens, the real drama unfolded quietly, in subtle gestures, shared glances, and whispered conversations. Those who were present witnessed a moment of unspoken tension that was far more powerful than any headline could convey. And Meghan, accustomed to having control over her narrative, found herself navigating unfamiliar territory. This was a room where charm alone would not guarantee acceptance, where visibility did not equal recognition, and where influence had to be negotiated carefully and strategically. The simple phrase, "I don't know you," had become a barrier, a reminder that even fame and notoriety could be held in check by presence, poise, and social acuity. The implications were immediate and profound. For Meghan, this was not just a social snub, it was a recalibration. It was a clear signal that she could not assume status in a carefully curated environment simply by showing up. For the guests, it was an education in celebrity diplomacy, a reminder of how power operates in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. And for the world, once the footage circulated, it became a case study in influence, strategy, and the social calculus of elite gatherings. Even now, imagine the psychological weight of those three words. They were not shouted, they were not dramatic, and they carried no overt hostility. Yet they conveyed everything: authority, boundaries, and control. They left Meghan standing in a room full of people, visible but unacknowledged, a masterclass in social power executed in real time. Every nuance, from Kim's posture to the tiny pause before she spoke, was designed to maximize the clarity and impact of the message. And the room reacted. Some laughed quietly, understanding the power dynamics at play. Others whispered excitedly, speculating on what Meghan's next move might be. Cameras clicked almost involuntarily, capturing fleeting expressions, subtle gestures, and the unspoken story unfolding between two high-profile women whose worlds had collided unexpectedly. The tension was electric, a charged moment suspended in time, as everyone waited to see how the narrative would unfold. But Meghan, resilient as she was, did not retreat entirely. Her next steps, calculated and deliberate, would determine whether this night would be remembered as a humiliation or as a strategic play in an intricate social chess game. And while Kim's words had delivered the first decisive move, the story was far from over. Because in these high-stakes environments, the first statement is only the opening act. Reactions, maneuvers, whispered strategies, and public perception all intertwine to create a drama that can escalate far beyond the room where it began. Meghan's next move, and the responses it would provoke, would set the stage for the remaining twists of the night, twists that no one present could fully anticipate, and that the world would soon dissect in exhaustive detail. And just as the room began to breathe again, thinking perhaps the drama had peaked, the quiet yet undeniable tension hung like a storm cloud. What Meghan did next would shock guests, staff, and eventually the entire globe. It was a subtle yet audacious escalation, a move that would forever mark that night at Crazy Horse as a turning point in celebrity social warfare. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The phrase, "I don't know you," hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a few seconds, the room seemed suspended in time, caught between disbelief, amusement, and curiosity. Guests froze mid-laughter, glasses paused halfway to lips, and cameras clicked almost automatically, capturing the tension for posterity. It was the kind of moment that makes people lean forward instinctively, even when they have no stake in the drama. But unlike staged celebrity confrontations designed for cameras, this was raw, unfiltered, and brimming with social tension that few could navigate. Whispers immediately began circulating among the guests. Did she just say that? To Meghan? Kim didn't even flinch. Some covered their mouths to stifle laughter, while others leaned closer to neighbors, hoping to decipher subtle nuances in Meghan's reaction. The energy in the room shifted, a subtle but unmistakable change, as if the atmosphere had been charged with static electricity. Every movement, every glance, every body language cue was now under scrutiny. For a room filled with A-listers, influencers, and international socialites, this was no ordinary party. These guests were experts in observing and responding to social cues, trained in the subtle art of reading power dynamics. They understood that even minor gestures carried weight, that recognition, or the lack thereof, was a form of currency, and that a single word could alter the narrative of the entire evening. In that sense, Kim's words were more than a snub. They were a strategic masterstroke, and the guests were witnessing an educational moment in elite social maneuvering. Some guests laughed quietly, more out of relief than amusement. Relief, because they weren't the target, and amusement at the sheer audacity of the encounter. Others were visibly uncomfortable, caught in a delicate balance of observing without appearing to take sides. Every subtle movement, from shifting weight to adjusting a drink in hand, was a calculated response to an unexpected and high-stakes social scenario. Meanwhile, social media, ever vigilant, began to react. Even as the party continued, snippets of whispers, partial video clips, and blurred photos began circulating online. The digital world, always hungry for drama, amplified the incident almost instantaneously. The hashtag I don't know you began appearing on Twitter within minutes. Memes were created almost in real time, capturing Meghan's stunned expression and juxtaposing it with captions ranging from humorous to biting. Within hours, millions around the globe were dissecting a moment that lasted less than a minute but carried enormous social implications. Some guests, recognizing the historical weight of what they had witnessed, began narrating the moment to those around them, embellishing it just enough to heighten the drama without distorting the core event. Each retelling added another layer of intrigue, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond the physical space of Crazy Horse. People in the room were not just observers. They were participants in a moment that would define the evening and eventually global conversation. But not everyone was entertained. A few of Kim's inner circle felt tension spike in ways they couldn't ignore. These were individuals whose social capital depended on maintaining the equilibrium of the room. Meghan's uninvited presence and Kim's calculated response had created a subtle imbalance. Staff members whispered to one another, security adjusted positions, and some guests subtly repositioned themselves to mitigate potential awkwardness. The delicate choreography of the evening, planned over months, had been disrupted by an unexpected variable, and everyone was acutely aware of the potential fallout. At the center of this social storm, Meghan's demeanor shifted subtly. Her initial confidence, bolstered by experience navigating public scrutiny, began to waver under the weight of unyielding social authority. Her practiced smile faltered, her posture momentarily tightened, and her eyes betrayed flashes of surprise and frustration. This was unfamiliar territory for someone accustomed to controlling narratives and commanding attention, and it created a moment of vulnerability rarely seen in Meghan's public appearances. Guests noticed. Some watched with curiosity, others with amusement, and a few with a sense of schadenfreude, witnessing someone so often in the position of power now navigating discomfort. Cameras captured fleeting expressions, raised eyebrows, suppressed smirks, and gestures that, in retrospect, revealed the undercurrents of social power at play. Every observer understood that they were witnessing a rare phenomenon, a celebrity of Meghan's stature being subtly, yet undeniably, socially checked. And yet, the party could not pause. The performances continued, champagne flowed, and laughter resumed in pockets, creating a surreal contrast to the charged encounter at the center of the room. The juxtaposition was fascinating. The evening maintained its air of elegance and celebration, even as a social drama unfolded at the epicenter. Guests were simultaneously immersed in entertainment and hyper-aware of the psychological dynamics around them, an experience that heightened both tension and intrigue. Some took discreet steps to engage Meghan elsewhere in the room, attempting to redirect attention or salvage a sense of inclusion. Others focused on Kim, observing how she maintained composure while navigating an unprecedented situation with grace. Every glance, every word, every movement contributed to a complex narrative, an invisible dance of social strategy that would be analyzed long after the champagne had been drained. For those watching from the outside, fans, social media followers, and journalists, the incident became a perfect storm of intrigue. Meghan's audacity, Kim's authority, and the reactions of every guest formed a multi-layered narrative ripe for speculation, discussion, and viral dissemination. The party, once intended as a celebration of one woman's birthday, had transformed into a case study in influence, power, and celebrity dynamics. The subtle details mattered. A laugh that was too loud, a glance that lingered, a hand positioned carefully on a hip. All of these cues contributed to a social tapestry that only insiders truly appreciated. Yet even casual observers could sense the drama unfolding. The interplay of authority, confidence, and vulnerability created a magnetic tension, compelling those present to pay attention and those observing from afar to speculate endlessly. Some attendees attempted to mediate the situation, stepping in with polite conversation, gestures of inclusion, or minor diversions. Yet every effort was met with calculated awareness. Meghan's attempts to engage were subtly deflected, Kim's inner circle maintained a poised distance, and the room as a whole oscillated between entertainment and unease. It was a delicate equilibrium, one maintained through social skill, awareness, and strategic subtlety. And then, as if on cue, the first real escalation occurred. Meghan, sensing the subtle resistance, attempted a move that would either assert her presence or backfire dramatically. She shifted her position, perhaps seeking a more favorable angle, perhaps attempting to initiate a conversation with someone in Kim's circle. It was a calculated gamble, a test of boundaries, and a demonstration of her willingness to assert herself despite the social friction. The room noticed. Cameras captured the shift, whispers intensified, and guests instinctively leaned forward, sensing the next pivotal moment. Social media feeds exploded with speculation, even as live observers tried to predict what might happen next. Every interaction, every gesture, was now amplified by the anticipation of an unfolding drama. And that's when the subtle power dynamics of the evening truly revealed themselves. Kim, observing Meghan's attempt to maneuver, maintained an unyielding composure. There was no overt confrontation, no dramatic rebuke, just the quiet authority of presence, posture, and awareness. The message was clear. Social boundaries would not be breached, and influence in this environment was earned, not assumed. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's quiet authority spoke louder than words could? That was Kim's strategy. She didn't need theatrics or public displays to assert dominance. The elegance and precision of her gestures conveyed everything necessary. Meghan, experienced and calculated though she was, had to navigate a new reality. Presence alone could not guarantee recognition or influence in this meticulously curated ecosystem. But the night was far from over. The party reacted, yes, but Meghan had not yet fully absorbed the implications of her presence. And while the cameras caught some of the surface-level interactions, the deeper drama, the whispered conversations, the strategic movements, the subtle power plays, remained hidden, yet they would shape the rest of the evening in ways few could anticipate. Because in high-profile gatherings like this, reactions are rarely immediate or obvious. The tension simmers, relationships are tested, and every participant becomes a player in a complex, invisible game. And what came next? The private confrontations, the behind-the-scenes maneuvers, and the viral fallout would elevate a simple snub into a global spectacle that few would forget. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when audacity meets absolute authority in the same room? That night at Crazy Horse, the collision was inevitable. Meghan Markle had made her entrance, boldly stepping into a curated world that had not anticipated her presence. The guests had reacted, whispers and speculation rippling through the room like a subtle earthquake. But the first real escalation, one that required intervention beyond social maneuvering, was about to occur. The security team, trained to maintain order in high-profile environments, found themselves facing a situation that tested both protocol and patience. Security personnel had been on high alert since the moment Meghan appeared. Their initial adjustments had been subtle: a shift in formation around Kim Kardashian, strategic positioning near entrances and the stage, and a series of discreet communications through earpieces. At first, it had seemed that subtle social cues might suffice to manage the unexpected guest. But Meghan's persistence in moving toward the inner circle signaled a new level of challenge, one that demanded direct, professional attention. Imagine being a security professional in a room filled with high-profile celebrities, billionaires, influencers, and royalty-level socialites. Your primary job is to ensure safety, maintain order, and protect the host's experience. But when an uninvited yet globally recognizable figure steps into the center of attention, your entire framework must adjust in real time. Every movement must be calculated, subtle, and effective, because any visible confrontation could escalate into a public relations nightmare. And that was the precise position the security team found themselves in that night. As Meghan approached Kim's inner circle, the team's lead operative subtly blocked the path, positioning themselves between her and the most sensitive areas of the room. The move was almost imperceptible, designed to guide rather than confront, but it carried an unmistakable message. Presence does not equate to permission. Meghan's reaction was, predictably, a mixture of surprise and frustration. Accustomed to navigating high-profile interactions, she had likely not anticipated such a direct, yet controlled, obstruction. Guests immediately sensed the shift. Conversations paused, eyes flicked toward the center of the room, and the previously subtle tension escalated into a palpable wave of anticipation. Everyone could feel that something significant was unfolding, though no one yet knew how far it would go. The contrast between Meghan's audacious approach and the composed, professional intervention of the security team created a dynamic that was both mesmerizing and anxiety-inducing. Have you ever witnessed someone being physically redirected without confrontation, and yet felt the intensity of the moment magnified? That's what happened. The security team was executing a perfectly measured control operation, ensuring that Meghan's uninvited presence did not spill over into chaos, but simultaneously reinforcing the power structure of the room. Every step, every slight hand movement, every strategic positioning communicated authority without words. Meghan, for her part, did not retreat immediately. She adjusted her posture, shifting slightly to attempt another angle of approach. Her expression remained composed, yet there were subtle micro-expressions betraying a rising frustration. Eyes narrowed briefly, lips pressed together for a fraction of a second, tiny signs, almost imperceptible, but observable to trained eyes and those paying close attention. This was the moment where audacity met calculated authority, and neither party was willing to yield. The surrounding guests became unwitting participants in this tension-filled dance. Some watched with fascination, observing every nuance of Meghan's body language and the security team's flawless execution. Others whispered among themselves, speculating on what might happen next. Social media, as always, began to buzz with real-time speculation. Even though cameras could not capture the subtleties behind the security barriers, the energy of the room communicated drama so palpable it could be felt through videos, GIFs, and later, countless written accounts. Security, however, was not merely reactive, they were proactive. Their movements were designed to contain, guide, and de-escalate without creating spectacle. A subtle step to one side, a gentle redirection of Meghan's trajectory, a slight shift in the positioning of the inner circle. Each adjustment was calculated to maintain equilibrium. In high-profile events, this type of invisible choreography is crucial. One misstep, one visible conflict, could dominate headlines, overshadowing the event entirely and potentially escalating into legal or social ramifications. Meghan, realizing the subtle blockade, attempted a new strategy. She engaged briefly with an adjacent guest, offering a polite smile and conversational opening, attempting to bypass the physical barrier without confrontation. But the security team anticipated this move, subtly adjusting their positions to maintain the integrity of the controlled environment. The brilliance of this maneuver was in its invisibility.